we will get started. So I'm going to do a quick introduction and then hand over. But first of all, I want to say again, thank you everyone for joining us. It's so lovely to have so many people here this morning, and we only sent the invites out for this very recently. Awesome, chat is working, but it's brilliant. We've had over 100 people sign up, and we're really excited to share some lessons in lead gen from UNHCR, from our good friend Richard. So I'll leave Jessie to do introductions, but I'll say that we have the honour of having Richard being the first person who has presented on one of our Forward Action webinars twice, and from two different organisations, and they are both brilliant organisations, and we're so lucky to have partnered with him at both places. So Richard is formerly of Greenpeace. If you've been following our webinars for some time, you'll have seen him present with us before, talking about, I think, regular giving drives via email. So that was the last topic, but here we are talking about lead gen, and we've got lots to say, so I'm going to hand over. Two kind of housekeeping things this morning. Firstly, you can use the Q&A function to ask questions throughout, and we will have time at the end where we will be putting questions to Richard and Jessie. And secondly, you can enable closed captions so you can follow along. Third thing is we will send a recording of this webinar out next week, so you can expect that in your inboxes next week. But do stick around for the questions at the end if you can, because that's where we get loads of learning and sharing happening as well. So there's hopefully plenty of time for questions, and any questions we don't get to, we will follow up in a blog post as well. So that please do ask as you go. There's no such thing as a silly question. And if you're asking it, chances are a lot of people want to hear the answers to that as well. Okay, thank you very much. Florence and I will turn our videos off now and hand over to Jessie and Richard to talk you through lead gen and how integrating digital into other channels can really impact your fundraising. Enjoy.
Thanks so much, Ali. Yeah, very quick intros. So I'm Jessie Hayes. I am a digital strategy manager at Forward Action. So I lead one of our project teams. I've been here for 5 years, and in that time, I have had the pleasure of working with Richard and the great team at UK for UNHCR. Richard, do you want to say a quick hello?
Hi everyone, great to meet you all, or see you all, and even seeing some familiar names in the chat. So hello to people old and new. I'm Richard from the UK for UNHCR, which is the charitable arm of the UNHCR, and yeah, looking forward to chatting to you all today about how to be working with Forward Action.
Brilliant. So yeah, that's us. And what we'll be covering today is why is lead generation still so important? So I know kind of everybody has like lots of opinions on this. I'm going to run through kind of some of the reasons that we see it as really, really important, given kind of today's context. I'm going to hand over to Richard to talk about some lessons from their lead generation program and all of their kind of brilliant activity that links in with that. And then we're going to talk a little bit just about how to enhance lead generation to make lasting connections with new supporters. So we've got quite a bit to cover. First, I am going to ask a question of you guys. So I think a poll is going to pop up on your screen now, just to get a bit of a gauge of kind of in what sense people have arrived on this webinar. Are you here kind of feeling really good about your lead generation at your organization? You think you have a really solid program, you just want to kind of see what other people are doing, figure out how to enhance it? Are you feeling good, but you're not sure if it's delivering kind of full potential, and that's why you're here? Or are you not feeling so good and you are hoping to get some kind of guidance, inspiration today? So if you can pick an option, and then I think Florence is going to do the magic once we've had a couple of responses, and we'll be able to see what the room is feeling like. Oh, here we go. Great stuff. Okay, excellent. Okay, so we've got a real mix, but that's quite nice that we've got so many people in that middle box, which is the kind of good, but we're not sure if it's delivering full potential. I feel like that's probably a lot of kind of our sentiment as people who work in the non-profit sector of kind of, we're doing our best, but we're never quite sure if it's, as good as it can be, as good as it should be. So hopefully we've got a lot in the content today that will be able to kind of help you leave at 10 a.m. ready for your Thursdays with some new ideas and kind of insights as well. So firstly, why is lead generation so important? I mean, the main reason is that direct to donate is very difficult, as I'm sure lots of you know. So getting that right on digital is kind of particularly difficult because you're relying on a lot of different factors to be right in order for someone to convert, like with that particular ask. you're asking a lot of one piece of content. You're basically asking a piece of content to say, hi, here we are. This is what we do. This is what your money will do. This is why you need to give to me right now. Which is a tall ask of one piece of content. And you also are missing the very compelling factor of in-person pressure that's present in channels like door-to-door fundraising telephone. So digital is a brilliant, brilliant channel, but it does just need that bit more kind of thought in terms of how you're going to communicate the need for somebody to sign up or somebody to donate to your organization. So instead of trying to curate that perfect direct to donate ask, which can often leave the public just feeling like they're seeing a lot of what you can see on the screen here from different organizations of, hi, and me again, we still need money. It can be more effective long term to have that really, really strong lead generation program that starts with that lower bar ask, and then you can unlock those kind of multiple opportunities to ask supporters to give. So you can use different motivations, framings, things that are happening to then make a financial ask or a higher bar ask of some kind. So it's not just about that immediate conversion, it's about kind of creating that connection. And even those people who don't convert immediately, they're not lost causes. If they're kind of, not leads who've become anything within the year, they're people who just can and hopefully will at some point become more engaged with your work if you give them the right asks. Ultimately, leads are people. This is very obvious, but I'm definitely very guilty of kind of getting swept up a little bit in the jargon sometimes. Leads, retention, attrition, all of that stuff. So yeah, just to state the obvious, leads are people. And I think we can lose that sometimes when we're talking about leads, especially when we're thinking about leads in the kind of volumes that we want to have the impact we want to have. So leads are people with just a range of motivations. So, there are all sorts of factors of why somebody might decide to join your organization, to sign up, to take an action with you on that particular day, what's going on in their personal life, what's in the news, how they're feeling, timing, and just recent history as well. Who have they recently given to? Do they feel like they've kind of done their bit on the kind of cause areas that they're passionate about recently? So yeah, leads are people. They surprise us and frustrate us in lots of different ways. But whatever tools we're using to kind of get that first connection with them via a digital channel, our goal is to connect with them. So whether that is a hand raiser or a petition, like this brilliant example from Good Law Project, whether that's a quiz or an engagement tool that's kind of doing a bit of that maybe education piece or inspiring, engaging before kind of asking for a sign up, or whether it's something with a little bit more of a kind of value for the supporter, like sort of a value exchange sign up, like this climate ebook from Oxfam. Whatever kind of tool we're using, we are using that as the first way to establish that connection so that we can then provide lots of opportunities afterwards for them to be engaged, creating that really, really long-term, like multifaceted engagement that just really, really lasts. So when we talk about that kind of follow on from the initial lead generation or that initial conversion, it's all about kind of moving people up that ladder. So there's a huge group of people who, whatever your organization is, wherever you're kind of working, there's a huge group of people who will share the values that your organization exhibits and demonstrates in trying to achieve your mission. Your job when you're doing lead generation is trying to get as many of those people who share those values and feel the things that you do, injustice, rage, all of that stuff, to sign up to your mailing list or another way that you can kind of continue to contact them. And then from there, we can ask them to make one-off gifts, join campaigns, set up a regular legacy gift. Now, it is all about moving people up the ladder, but we often don't see people behave like that. As I said, leads are people, they're very surprising. If they have signed up at one point, they often kind of don't move sort of from low to high bar action over a sort of, established period of time. That's obviously like because of some kind of consistent challenges that we all face in kind of engaging supporters around people's attention, their behavior, which cause they're just kind of feeling a little bit more aligned with at that time, and also their giving ability as well, or, their ability to kind of share their time, things like that. That can really vary, but there's also lots of different opportunities. So, people kind of come in and out of, being a supporter. Maybe they've been on an email list for sort of 8 years, and they haven't really done much for a couple of years. And then randomly they give quite a big gift, something's really caught their eye. You've done something that's really, really connected with them. Yeah, people can surprise us. And what we often talk about forward action is that sometimes maybe the ladder of engagement is a bit more of a dance floor and people are sort of hopping around. So again, just really kind of underlining that importance of that initial connection that kind of sells to people, yes, this is a group, an organization I want to be a part of. That then means that even if those different factors in terms of available time, available money, attention span kind of drift, we can always kind of come back and there will be an ask that will resonate with them. There will be something that brings them back to those kind of core values that they joined you with. So instead of kind of focusing on, I think what can sometimes be quite a strict sort of audience segmentation or like persona approach, I'm not saying it can't be useful, it absolutely can. But I think instead of doing that and sort of focusing more on like how people differ and sort of drilling them down to like demographics, interest behaviors, where they live, all that kind of stuff, we tend to try and look a little bit broader at the values that sort of connect all of us when we talk about lead generation. So instead of ending up with like sort of being like, okay, this is the one person out of the 5 or 6 that we want to reach, we sort of say what are the values that underpin our lead generation ask that most people will resonate with, things like justice, equality, those type of things. So instead of kind of doing that sort of demographic or very, very sort of hyper-specific approach to who our audience might be, what we tend to do at Forward Action is encourage you to look at who that audience might be from a values perspective, which is usually a lot bigger. And that is something that UNHCR and the UK4U team have done a great job of, which is why we're really excited to showcase their campaign. Before I hand over to Richard, I'm just going to sum up. So the forward action approach to lead gen, which is kind of underpinning what we're chatting about today. And that is a values-based and people-centered approach to lead generation. So we're focusing on those emotions and those values that the majority of people share that will connect them to your cause. And so instead of that traditional view of lead gen of like the sort of 2-step conversion, we focus on kind of attracting people who share your values, testing approaches, finding what works for you, and then blending those channels to create those kind of really, really engaging, high conversion journeys. So we end up with essentially leads who are people who really want to be part of your organization's mission. So yes, I am going to hand over to Richard now to share the great work that they have done on lead generation.
Thank you, Jessie, and hi again to everybody. And I just want to start by saying, before I talk about UNHCR, just look like massive shout out to everybody who, in the survey at the start, there was just so honest with your answers around it being good and there being space for improvement. And like one of the things I do want to kind of like that acknowledge that relates to what Jessie was saying there about it being like a dance floor is that lead generation is hard. But like I think like sometimes it can be a bit of a case of, oh, you set up a form and this will capture someone's data and it'll capture their email address and then they'll go on and do all of these things. But actually it takes a lot of work. And really what I'm going to tell a story about now with this presentation is us turning a bit of a corner at UK4U and HCR over 2024, but a lot of work went into that and a lot of work from different people. There's even a couple of people on the call here from our team, David and Sage are on the call, and Henry, who used to work for us too, really worked over the last sort of like 12 to 18 months to make this work happen from across the team. So yeah, it is like, again, thank you for everybody's honesty there. And I do want to say like an overarching message that I'm going to try to like take away from this call or convey in this call even is keep going and keep trying different things. So on that, we are actually just go to the next slide then, Jessie. UNHCR, I imagine many of you have heard of us, but just like in case not, you've got a difficult name to remember. UNHCR stands for the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. In short, we are an aid agency and an awareness-raising organisation that primarily delivers aid to displaced people and refugees and communities and families who've been impacted by conflict and persecution around the world. And yeah, we also do solidarity work too, and helping people and supporting communities as they sort of seek safety in other countries or flee their homes. And onto the next slide, please, Jessie. Thank you. But we UNHCR has been around since about 1950, I think it is. So yeah, next year 75 years old. But we're UK for UNHCR. We're actually only 5 years old as a charitable organisation. So as much as people have been able to contribute and there've been sort of like corporate donations and different types of donations like to UNHCR, and particularly by governments in the past, the individual giving part of it is relatively like young. So the team, our individual giving team, has been really building up the program over the last 5 years or so. So as that second point says, sorry, I'm just going to plug my laptop in. I'm just about to run out of battery. Sorry, just one moment.
No problem. Bad timing from the battery.
It is.
It's always the worst.
quite quick though. The plug socket was just behind me. So we've grown from, I've put 0 there, but like, yeah, it was sort of a smallish group of supporters to more than like 100k donors, 60,000 people on our email list, so and around sort of 70 to 80,000 people that we send that mail packs to within the last 5 years. So we've had really, really strong growth in about 5 years. Really pleased with where we've gone so far. But we're also increasingly within the sort of the last 12 to 18 months really thinking about how we can reach like new audiences too. And as part of that, we set quite ambitious goals for our lead generation program in 2024. And we work closely with Forward Action and another agency called Blue State too, and other folks, which I'll just sort of talk about in a moment, to develop this program and to really see how we could scale it up over the last year or so. Next slide, please. So in terms of objectives, like I know this is sort of an obvious thing to sort of state with any project, but like, yeah, we set some goals on what we wanted to achieve, and sort of use benchmark figures to be able to sort of to say where we wanted to go. So we set we have the objective of launching a new lead generation testing program that runs in 2024, generating in the order of 2,000 to 3,000 leads per month via digital ads and via different digital channels. Aiming for a cost per lead of below £5. We'll talk about the sort of the sector benchmarks in a moment too. So we went a little bit above the sector benchmarks there to just give ourselves some wriggle room. But we were really invested in integrating our tech too, and making sure that we were able to sort of to move data around different platforms, including Blueprint, which is the platform that Forward Action use, and we have a license to be able to use it too, to be able to make sure that we could move data quite seamlessly between different parts of our organization, so that we're able to sort of to talk to these new leads and new people we're bringing in. And a particular focus of our conversion work so far has been on telemarketing. So I'll talk about the sort of how that works with our program too, and where we're thinking about going next in 2025. So yeah, mentioned Blueprint already. You can see that at the bottom, the logo from Forward Action. Do have a look at it if you're not using it already. But we're also using Care too, and we found that to be probably not like generating the sort of the same volumes that we've seen on some other channels, but a really steady result in terms of driving new people to sign up to support UK for UNHCR's work. And similar sort of hand raisers there, similar sort of content that we developed on Blueprint was also transferred to Care too. But I put the Facebook logo in there, and it's actually really, I'm using that to represent Meta. There is, if you've not used it before, there's a lead generation tool and lead centers that you can set up within your Meta adverts too, and we've used that quite heavily as well. And we wanted to make sure we were using sort of a range of different pieces of kit and a range of different tools to be able to sort of to compare and contrast different channels in terms of cost per lead, but in terms of conversions and ongoing relationship with those. So we really tried to embed a testing approach into sort of the approach that we took. And I don't just mean testing as in like multivariate testing, A/B testing, but piloting different things. Next slide, please. So this is one of the hand raisers that we developed. Well, Henry in our team developed together with Forward Action's team. So how we worked with Forward Action here was Jessie spoke earlier on about the sort of the different values that we tried to speak to with our hand raisers. So a challenging issue that we had to sort of to work around at UNHCR is we're not a political organisation, we're a politically neutral organisation. So we couldn't have a petition in the strictest sense, like we couldn't have something that was targeted at government, and we couldn't have something that say I'm sorry if everybody can hear some banging there. There's just some DIY going on in the flat across. If you can, it should stop any second. So yes, we had to sort of to come up with different ways to be able to sort of speak to different people's values, and we developed different themes around. This is the human rights theme, I think, that we sort of went with, and we developed a theme that was around solidarity and standing with refugees. We talked about history in one of our hand raises too, and we talked about the history of the sort of the UN Convention on Human Rights. So we took different angles there and tested them all against each other, but they largely looked like this hand raiser sign up that you can see here with a target that people could add different level of details, and we took different strands there. Oh, and hi, Rhiannon. Good to see you in the chat. So you can see some of the different ads that we use here. So we got the different lead generation pages sort of set up on Blueprint and on Meta as well. And alongside that, we also set up these ads. So you can see here, I mentioned very briefly the sort of the history of the UN Convention on Human Rights, and you can see here that there's a photo of it being signed, an old photo from the 50s, and then we've got the UN aid worker on the right-hand side here, talking about the UK having a history of compassion to refugees. Too. So that was one side of it, was the digital advertising and pointing people to be able to sort of sign up on Blueprint or to fill in a meta lead generation form. Do you want to skip to the next slide? Jessie, do you want me to talk about the first line here, and then I'll switch over to you about the benchmarks?
Yeah,
so just go very quickly into the details of what we achieved. There's lots of data out there, so I'm going to give you the very top line information. On our first sort of rounds of testing over 6 months or so, we were seeing sort of an average cost per lead of in the order of £4 to £7. So we're pretty happy with that. As a starting point, it was roughly sort of in the arena of what we set as our goal of £5, but about sort of 200 to 300 leads per lead per week. And so we were sort of thinking, well, where can we go next and how can we scale up? But definitely a solid start there. What we were really pleased with is the opt-in rate, though, and people wanting to sort of stay in touch with us. And we were, even before we started experimenting with telemarketing, we were even seeing some leads come on and just being added just into our email list and receiving our appeals, starting to sort of to give significant donations to us too. So there's some people who sort of, we hadn't really defined a relationship with them or worked out how we wanted to kind of to keep in touch with them, but because of that decent opt-in rates, they're at least responding to our appeals. Jessie, do you want to talk about the next slides? Shall I hand over to you?
Yeah, so we kind of just wanted to contextualize that data a little bit here. So in the second line, we've obviously got the M&R sector benchmark, which I'm sure many of you will be aware of, a wonderful report that is now annual, I think. I think it might be doing the new one now. Anyway, that's got the overall cost per lead benchmark for everybody who kind of submitted data into the report as £3.17, which obviously shows that kind of here we had that sort of £4 to £7 for the UK for You hand raisers, which kind of showed that we could have been potentially doing a little bit better. But obviously with the £5 target that Richard mentioned before, we're kind of able to reach that sort of 200, 300 leads per week. And as you mentioned, Richard, that opt-in rate is really, really amazing and higher that we generally see. So the extra kind of data that we have at Forward Action is basically just that obviously we work with a lot of partners and we have that data kind of pooled and available to us in a really, really brilliant dashboard that our team kind of keep up to date, which is only kind of internal. We haven't figured out a way to kind of share that in a format that's similar to the M&R benchmark report yet. But why I wanted to kind of highlight this with the results that Richard is talking about is because it is really important to kind of see your results in as sort of tighter context as you can, because what we can see from 2023 is that the overall CPL that we had on kind of the digital lead generation programs we were running was £1.9. But for international aid organisations, that is significantly higher. That's at £4. So that actually kind of says that the activity that UK for You had run in this particular pilot for their lead generation program, it was kind of performing as you would have expected and was actually doing really well when we looked at the opt-in rate. So that kind of shows us that when we're giving people those sign-up forms or asking them to take an action, they're not just kind of doing it for, okay, yeah, I'm going to sign this now because it's going to make something happen, and that's me sort of done. People who were signing up to UNHCR were wanting to be part of that mission and that kind of ongoing activity. So yeah, just a bit of extra context there that hopefully sheds light on that data. Hand back to you, Richard.
Great, thank you, Jessie. And yeah, I guess just to reply to a couple of comments I can see coming through in the chat too, like Jacob, yeah, that's a really interesting point. Like 62p per new lead. I mean, that is fantastic. Like that's great to sort of to see. And I mean, huge shout out to you and your team if you're achieving that. Like previously, I worked at Greenpeace for several years, and sometimes you'd see leads for sort of less than 20 pence. But it does differ differ from organisation to organisation, and it differs like between the granularity of what you can do and what you can say as an organization. One of the things that we kind of found at Greenpeace is obviously Greenpeace, when I was working there, you could be extremely political and you can be really targeted. And I think it would often mean that like people would be like really clear like what they were signing up to through a petition. And yeah, sometimes when you're sort of like doing other types of movement building work, it can be a little bit more challenging to achieve 62 pence. But definitely, if you're chancing for sort of a Q&A at the end, love to hear more about your approach there to get that low costs. But yeah, as Ali's mentioning too, the M&R benchmarking report does give granular information on the different types of organisation. Very quickly coming back to the presentation, so just from some rough maths on that, like, you know, taking the sort of the middle point of like 250 leads per week of halfway between, you know, 200 and 300, 52 weeks per year, with 65% opt-in rate. The number of contactable leads we were ending up with per year was 8,450 leads per year, which if we projected that for 12 months, we were really pleased with that, like really, really great start sort of like for year one. But we were also thinking, next slide, please. How can we go bigger? How can we level up? And it's like, it's, you know, it's just, again, it is a challenge, and it is a thing where it's like, I feel like sometimes in organizations, like it's a bit like we can become focused on, well, we've achieved this and how we go to the next thing, and that's like, that's great, but it is like, it is a thing to be able to, particularly with lead generation, it is a numbers game, and it is about, you know, thinking about like how many different leads like what's the grand total of leads that you can bring in per year. I think that when I was working at Greenpeace, our lead gen target was 400,000 leads per year, which is astronomical. And you know, at UKFU, just a completely different organisation, and you know, achieving something like that would always be like, you know, a massive challenge. Obviously, we'd hope to sort of to be able to get there, but I feel like it is about sort of like setting targets for yourself and sort of setting realistic targets too, based on data and based on what you've achieved so far. But we have started to ask ourselves some key questions, which are on the next slide, which are, how can we lower costs? How can we generate larger volumes of leads? And how do we align lead gen with the wider organization's work? And we started to take some inspiration from across the organization and from different places too. And we actually arrived on inspiration from Hollywood, would you believe it? So there's two actors here who I'm sure you'll recognise, and you can see if you look on the lapels of what they're wearing there, they're wearing blue ribbons. So our Goodwill Ambassadors team, our celebrity team, our influencers team, whatever you'd like to call them, at UNHCR, did some amazing work at the Oscars in 2023, where they distributed these blue ribbons to people who we were already working with as part of our work at UNHCR. And we found them to be really popular. They got really strong media coverage. And we had boxes of them at our office too, and we started to distribute them to volunteers. And we found we were sort of becoming really popular, just like on the anecdotal feedback that we were receiving from them. People wanted them who were already engaged with us. And people would say they'd wear them, people would say they'd be out and about and say it would be like a talking point or a conversation starter when we were wearing them too. So I thought, well, maybe there's something in this. So we started to start to test this from a lead generation perspective and from a fundraising perspective in 2024 as well. And we ended up with this campaign. So forgive me for sort of the slightly less Hollywood, or well, you can interpret it yourselves whether that's a Hollywood photo or not. But that's me and Jenna in our team here at UK for UNHCR wearing the ribbons, and we set up this order form both via Blueprint and via Meta, where it was possible for our supporters to request one for free. And we were really wondering like where this would go, because obviously there's a cost of manufacturing a ribbon and there's a cost of shipping it to someone and getting it to someone too. So there was already an immediate cost associated with it. But we started to see some really positive results. Our advertising costs in terms of like cost per lead across both opted in and not opted in leads came down to £1.10. So that was a huge jump down from a sort of £4 to £7 mark to £1.10, a real like reduction of like, 60 or 70% less and lower costs. And even when we added in the production cost of the ribbon at £1.50 and the postage costs, which we think we can get down to, that was only ordering like a few thousand ribbons. Like if we scale things up, we should be able to reduce those further too. And that came to sort of like a total cost of £2.60. So again, even when we added that in, those production costs, and even when we added in the postage costs, it even came in a little bit lower than some of the other work that we were doing from some of the other types of sign-up mechanisms that we were testing. And critically, we were finding that it was 91% new. And I would definitely recommend adding this in as one of your KPIs if you're doing lead generation work, of not just looking at opted in and contactable and how long people continue to subscribe, but how many people are new to your email list. Because if you're getting 100 leads and only 2 of them are brand new to you as supporters, then it's actually your costs are significantly higher. So we saw a really, really strong result of like, this is really speaking to a new audience. And there was donations at the point of sign up too, like a 3% donation rate. Again, when you're talking about small volumes, it's not huge amounts of donations, but if you compare that to say like any other appeals that we often run, these are sort of a decent results. A 3% conversion rate of people immediately donating. If we were running an email appeal and we were getting conversion rates like that, we'd be pretty pleased with that response. And an average gift of £18. We get quite a high average gift, like above that, and I know that's below the sort of the M&R benchmarks too. But then again, it wasn't really leaning heavily into the fundraising side of things at this stage, and before we switch telemarketing. So next slide, please. So yeah, pivoting from that to sort of the telemarketing side of work, we do a lot of telemarketing or a decent amount of telemarketing work at UK for UNHCR as it is. And that largely focuses on like existing donors. But we started to sort of think about how we could integrate telemarketing too, because I mean, I guess like we've having worked at like at Greenpeace for several years before I joined UK for UNHCR, there's a real synergy between the sort of telemarketing team and the team that worked on lead gen. Like we literally used to sort of like sit next to each other, and there was a real sort of approach of can we try and call people within the first few weeks of them signing up to take part and to say they're interested in an organisation. I was speaking to sort of Ali and Jessie and Florence about this the other day, and they were suggesting in an ideal world, try and even get those donors contacted or called within the first few hours. And that's certainly an aspiration we're sort of starting to think about for where we can go in the future in 2025. But we do a lot of calling work as it is, I say, with like existing donors. And we also run thankathons every 6 months where we like whip around the organisation. Our supporter care team does it. And we just, in a day, fill in a spreadsheet and get lots of people from across the organisation to sign up to just making as many phone calls as possible to donors and to people who supported us anyway, and just be like, look, thank you for being part of the organisation. We really appreciate your support. So we do really kind of lead into sort of contacting people over the phone. But we have carried that through to lead generation with a focus on regular giving, and some of the results are on the next slide, please. So we found that 20% of leads would leave a telephone number. We've been looking to improve that a little bit, and we've been working with Forward Action as it is. But 20% out of the thousands of people that have come through gave us a definite number of people that we could call. And we work with a telemarketing agency called Angel, and we agreed with them through like a few rounds of discussion of what would be the best call to action in our script would be to go straight for a regular gift. So quite a big ask. We can talk about why we did that and why we went big and how we sort of planning to drop down from that too, if that's of interest. But for the purposes of a test that we did, we went straight in there with a regular gift, and we even found a decent really strong result of 4% donation rate too. And again, if we compare that to our emails, it's not a competition here. Different channels perform in different ways, but I guess just to put that 4% conversion rate in context is that, like, again, it's a strong result from the people that we've called in. And I feel that, like, our lesson here is that, like, there is a solid amount of people that we found that have come in and have said, yeah, I'm ready to go, like, to a higher level of support, which is regular giving, like, quite quickly. And have gone straight in for a sort of an average gift of £8 a month, and we're planning to sort of continue that and make it central to our work in our 2025, and have a real focus in our program of work from going lead gen to signing people up to going telemarketing to then just going straight to a regular gift. In terms of, like, what comes next, I'd say, like, our focus in 2024 has really been about, like, establishing the sort of what our supporters and what the general public are kind of respond to, and what we can sort of, like, fit in with our messaging, and where what we're comfortable putting out there as an organization. And with us turning a corner with a blue ribbon and thinking about what else we can do with value exchange products has kind of led us to thinking about things like this. So this is a sign-up page from Australia for UNHCR. So that's a charitable arm of UNHCR in Australia. And they have this recipe book. And to read you a quote from the page there, the text is quite small, but on the left-hand side, it says, "From Ukraine to Sierra Leone, each recipe was selected by a current or former refugee to tell their story and share their culture." So people can type in their details here and be sent a free downloadable version, a free PDF version of this recipe book. So we're sort of thinking about what we do here around this. Like, is there an idea here? And again, it's this thing around, like product and values, and how can we create something where, I suppose this would speak to sort of the idea of, like, creating a value exchange where people are happy to hand over their information, say, in exchange for sort of receiving something back. So we're thinking about doing something there and testing that, and getting a similar page, similar to this setup on Blueprint once we've got the product designed. But we're also thinking about other stuff that we can do too around stickers and around other things that kind of people can, like, publicly display their values. And interestingly, on my bike ride into work, I've started to see we do have some posters that we've been sending out to where people can put something in their window, a bit like a sort of a political party, like, poster that you see in, like, a general election. And I've started to sort of to see people display these in their windows too, interestingly, when I'm just cycling into the office. And we're now starting to think, well, what can we do with that? But very quickly, on the sort of the next slide, we're also thinking about, like, if people don't go there with a regular giving ask of, like, just going back to this dance floor that Jessie was talking about before, about where can we go next. And the UK for UNHCR, we do a lot of events. This is one that was just our team has worked on in recent weeks. It's an installation, an artist installation with the woman in yellow there, who's the artist Es Devlin, who some of you might have heard of. And she worked with 50 people from around the world who've sought refuge and sought safety in London. And it was about sharing their stories. And that was a church called St Mary le Strand in central London. And we're thinking about, right, okay, well, if people don't immediately go there, how can we get them to turn up to something in real life? Where else can we? How can we survey people? How can we use WhatsApp? How can we use SMS to be able to sort of to keep a conversation going and just be like, all right, well, you haven't just arrived over here, but we'll talk to you on another channel. How can we keep talking to you? And okay, maybe regular giving isn't your thing, but we do this other area of work. And how can we find something that really speaks to their values? And we're really thinking about how can we pivot to that and how we can work alongside other teams in 2025.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Richard. There was so much there, and I can see the chat popping off. I've not even dared to open it, but yeah, I hope you all have kind of lots of ideas, inspiration, and questions, which we'll get to very, very shortly, because I'm going to whiz through a couple of slides so that we can have more time for the Q&A. Basically, we wanted to talk very, very quickly about how you can enhance your lead generation approach, but some of these are things that kind of tactics that Richard has mentioned already. So essentially, all I really really want to say here is that if you are interested or like curious about any of these, please do shoot us an email at Forward Action. We would love to help you kind of problem solve around how you can use these tactics within your lead generation programs. The first one I wanted to mention is Valex. The recipe kind of Valex that Richard mentioned there is a really, really great example of a digital asset that you can create with potentially content that you either have already or that you can kind of get from your wider community of supporters and people that you support as well. So please don't feel held back if you don't have an incredible ribbon that Bill Nye wore. Valex can take lots of different forms. And yeah, I think the recipe kind of download is a really, really great example of kind of doing that in a way that might be more suitable for some of those maybe smaller organizations that are here. The second one is telemarketing. Again, just to say that this can be such a powerful channel, especially when kind of paired with digital lead generation. The one thing I wanted to add to kind of what Richard was talking about was the big kind of impact of a small change on telemarketing. So one change that we made to the telemarketing opt-in, telephone opt-in on the original kind of sign-up page that was really impactful was basically just essentially like a formatting and slight rewording change on the opt-in, and that basically led to 67% more phone opt-ins, which is obviously, again, with small volumes, you kind of go, okay, we're getting a couple of extras, but once you're kind of scaling that up, you're seeing a huge difference in the number of contactable telephone leads that you're getting. And the final one I'm super excited for, and I think hopefully maybe if people are interested, we might be doing a webinar on this in the near future, is WhatsApp and the potential that can have to kind of engage and convert those new leads. 95% of WhatsApp messages are read. The potential for engagement is just huge. And we've got some kind of initial results from early projects at the moment that are showing really, really high engagement. One example is donate rates in a WhatsApp welcome journey being kind of twice that of the email equivalent. So this is a channel we're really excited about. We're collecting data on that at the moment, and we are hoping to kind of be able to share that with more of you soon. But if you're interested, again, please get in touch. I'm going to whiz through key takeaways and then hand back to Ali for the questions. So key takeaways are, firstly, consider how to build relationships first. When you think about lead gen, don't start with what tools are we going to build. Think, how are we going to build this relationship? What values do people have? What emotions are we trying to use to kind of create a connection? How do we go from there? We love building tools for Forward Action, but it's really, really important to remember that the building relationships first. The second one is just to review your previous lead generation data. I think we often are looking for kind of the new shiny idea, and actually something that's really, really useful, but unfortunately more boring, is looking back at the data you already have on leads that you've gotten from different channels. Who stuck around? Who didn't do anything after they kind of joined? How did they stick around and then do something a lot later? There's a lot that you can do with the data that you've got to kind of guide your lead generation approach. Richard, I think you've got a couple of takeaways.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I definitely really stress this point too around like integrations, and I'd say the blueprint. I mean, Henry, who used to work in our team at UK for UNHCR and worked on the lead generation work, just spoke about how straightforward that is to be able to make a blueprint work alongside with like Salesforce, which is what we use as our CRM. Certainly comparing it to getting things set up in Meta and moving data between like Meta lead generation forms, which can be a real challenge. But like it can be a faff. But I feel like leaning into your relationship with your data team and really making that work is just really worthwhile. So make your data team your best friend if they're not already. And then next slide, please. Yeah, and then this just comes back to the sort of the dance floor. The work across different teams to offer different CTAs to your leads, engage them in a way that suits them, and just kind of but not giving up if people don't like immediately respond to you, particularly with a fundraising ask, and thinking about, all right, we've got a welcome journey that's on email and it's across like SMS too, but like, how can we make things up and continue to sort of test to find something, whether it's even just something as simple as, asking people to follow you on social media, or asking people to take part in a survey, or asking them to take part in a poll, and building from there. And yeah, test. And I think I'd sort of like mentioned this already too. I mentioned like A/B multivariate testing, but like testing different things. I know that Rihanna here has talked about like care too in the chat. But yeah, it's very much an approach that we've taken, and not just doing multivariate testing, but like, not just doing hand raises, but thinking about what else can you do, from petitions to lead generation forms to value exchange products too.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important distinction. The kind of, yeah, piloting different things, as you said, different tactics, different approaches. But also, yeah, don't overlook small changes. As I mentioned, they can have a huge impact. So the kind of multivariate A/B testing can have a really, really big impact. And because we're forward action, we'll end on an example of that, which is kind of really sort of, I guess, yeah, quite a like an obvious test to do, just around kind of design and kind of colors. One of the tests we ran with the UNHCR team was just on whether this kind of more emergency sort of based color palette on the sign up page would increase or decrease conversions. And we saw that actually their branded one kind of worked better. And obviously that's again a big kind of difference when we look at those conversion rates when we are scaling things up. So definitely agree with kind of we want to test across all forms. So those multivariate A/B kind of small changes, and then also testing those different approaches, different ways of getting, attracting new leads. I believe that is us. Yes, last slide. So I'm going to stop sharing and hand back to Ali to ask some questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Richard and Jessie. That was really fascinating. And it's brilliant to see so much chat happening and so many people sharing their experiences as well. So thank you, everyone, for your generosity of sharing. We've got great questions. They're juicy. They could go for 20 to 30 minutes. So we're going to try and keep it punchy. But I'm going to start because there's been a few about audience targeting. So starting at kind of the beginning of the journey, multi-level question here for you, Richard and Jessie. How do you avoid attention and comments from people who are anti-refugee and anti-immigration? Are you using detailed targeting to reach specific audiences? And how do you make sure you're reaching new audiences and not going back to the same people?
A few different questions there. How do we avoid it? I mean, unfortunately, particularly in the real political climate that we're living in at the moment, I'd say like it's extremely difficult to avoid it. I think if we get actively hostile comments and feedback in our ads, then we have like quite a robust community management guidelines where it's just unacceptable, and we won't engage with those comments, and we do very unfortunately, I have to say, like we have had some of that. We also get like lots of lovely comments too in our ads, and obviously people kind of like will pile in and kind of support each other, sometimes in good ways and sometimes in bad ways. But yeah, we try to sort of amplify comments that are sort of like supportive of our work, as opposed to kind of like avoiding them. And in our targeting, that's something that we're going to see, particularly when you use like broad targeting. If you use something like Advantage Plus, which is recently become something that we're sort of like testing with our advertising too. Your ads can end up in different spaces. Like for broad targeting, we tried a mix of things. So like we've really tried a campaign that found that just went for like a broad sort of approach in terms of like impressions and reach. We didn't find that quite as effective, like as cost. I'd have to dig out the different like lookalike audiences and double check on the data there too, and find out like exactly who we've targeted. I'd have to give some more specific information on that. But yeah, we find like generally a news interested audience and lookalike audiences with our donors are very effective too across our advertising work. But yeah, if you wanted some more specific information, I'd have to sort of dig that out. And was a final point there. I feel like there's quite a lot come through in the chat, so I hope that's.
There's a question as well about how do you make sure you're reaching new people and not kind of going to the same pool?
I mean, I can jump in on that just on a campaign setup point, because I've got a big, huge piece of advice on the not having negative comments affect the performance of your lead generation campaign. We have an example of a partner that we worked with very recently where this became the case. And the big thing that you can do to stop that happening is actually in your campaign setup. If you set your campaign setup to be optimizing towards clicks or engagements or kind of reach, anything like that, then negative comments will amplify and optimize your ads towards the wrong people. So you'll get negative comments and Meta goes, great, these are the type of people you want to see your ads because you've asked us to optimize towards clicks and engagements. We're going to find more people like that. And what you end up then is a campaign that's got loads and loads of comments, loads of engagement, clicks. It's not converting, and you've got, kind of your community management team, whoever's doing that, having a really terrible time on your comments. If you set up your campaign towards that lead goal or even kind of completed registration, something that basically says somebody actually signed up and this was, somebody who wanted to be part of the solution, you will then be optimizing towards those people, even if you're getting negative comments. And then you can do what Richard's mentioned about, as long as you've got that really, really strong kind of community management approach, that's kind of fine because you can do that on the ads, but it's not going to affect the performance of your campaign. On the campaign setup, there are lots of things that you can do to stop existing supporters see your ads, to do with like exclusions and things like that. But that often depends on more of your kind of GDPR. I won't go more into that. I think I've kind of got more specific questions. Maybe I can put something in the Q&A wrap up that we send around because I don't want to get too technical.
Okay, thank you both. I've got a question here. Hopefully that's answered some of the questions on targeting. I know it's a very big topic, so we could talk about that for a long time. Wanted to talk about attrition rates because there's been some chat in the chat, but also there's a question that came through. So it's a question of, have you been monitoring the attrition rates for these kind of the new lead gen donors, and how are they comparing to other channels? Some people have seen success with engagement and conversion for Valex lead gen kind of models, but then the attrition is higher. Is that something you've seen so far?
So is that a question from Alex? Because I think Alex, I came back and said, what kind of attrition? If we're talking about donor attrition, I mean, mainly the focus on our lead generation book in 2024 has been on like the actual mechanism itself and on finding something that kind of can convert at volumes. With the attrition rates that we're finding with the regular givers that we're bringing in is comparable to sort of the rest of our digital program. Like our digital program has been, I think we've got a 12-month like the amount of people that make it to sort of to 12 months of regular gifts is about 80%. So, pretty reasonable, but like space for improvement there. I'd say that like one of the areas that we're kind of thinking about separately for 2025 is like with attrition, is thinking about the areas of the kind of the pain points and like how can we introduce like save journeys, where say if somebody has cancelled, it'll be about being able to go back to them and say, look, instead of cancelling, could you, drop your gift to sort of half the amount of your regular giving? And we're thinking about things like that. And thinking about like how can we find like kind of the right donation amount. I spoke specifically about like the £8 a month of sort of like this new audience. So yeah, at the moment it's comparable to sort of the rest of the program. If that's the kind of attrition that you're talking about, the sort of for regular givers, or another type of attrition.
Now, I assume it was a regular giving retention question, so that is really helpful to see. I don't know if everyone's seen, but Blue State did a really interesting piece of research about donors' habits and donor behavior and a kind of snapshot of donors now. And coming out of that research was a much higher intention to cancel direct debits in the next 12 months, or kind of expectation that supporters will be cancelling. So if you do have those regular giving programs and it's the bedrock of your giving, I think that supporter stewardship and retention is a really important place to put your energy and attention in the next 12 months. So that's something to think about kind of regardless of where your supporters have come from, and something that we're looking at a lot with our partners. I've got another question here, which is possibly our last one, but maybe time for two more. What are the ethical considerations around telemarketing? This person saying it's not something they've tried. Was that a conversation that you had? Were there any concerns around that? And what would you say to reassure people if they're thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, there's definite ethical concerns. I think there's a lot of ethical concerns in the UK, and we think a lot about sort of incidents where some organisations have contacted their donors like in an inappropriate way. I mean, I'd say we put a lot of time into like refining our script, and making sure that like people opt in only when they want to sort of to opt in. I feel that people really have to sort of actively like tick the boxes and things like that. We don't do any like auto opt-in that's to our hand raisers or to any of the stuff that we do on our meta lead generation forms. People have to be really actively saying that I want to kind of hear from us. And obviously, with any of the communications that we send out, we give a very clear pathway to people being able to unsubscribe. We get a lot of feedback from our telemarketing agency on it too, on like how it's going, and opportunities to sort of like listening to calls and to how it's going down. I'd say that what we're finding with our lead generation audience, like so far, particularly with the ribbons, is that people like really, really want to receive this thing, and receive a ribbon in the post, and assigning a hand raiser that's about human rights. Like a lot of our language at UNHCR is quite technical and quite I'd say like people have to be actively making the choice to be sort of wanting to hear from us. So it's not been like a major consideration, but I'd definitely be thinking about how you get people to permission to sort of to keep in touch and doing that in the right way if it's something that you're kind of concerned about around any ethical considerations there.
Brilliant, thank you. And another one on TM, because it's not something we talk about very often, so it's quite exciting to have an opportunity to talk about that, is kind of how much time went into agreeing the call guide and script for it? And did you include case studies, or have you kept it quite generic? How's that process gone for you?
How much time? With a really good question, I'd have to find out. I didn't write the original script, so I'd say I have just rewritten the new script, and we're spending like a couple of days, I suppose, refining it. We get a lot of feedback from our agency too, of being a bit like, well, we think that this would work, or how have you presented this in this way, and here's how you do a drop ask, and here's how you might be able to do something that's not a financial ask. If people don't want to give a regular gift, how you go to sort of a one-off gift ask, or how you potentially go to something else. I've been a bit like, oh, do you mind if we text you a quick survey or something like that? But I'd say probably like any program of work, like whether it's email, whether it's stuff on your website, whether it's ads, the task is, the blessing and a curse. It's probably never ending. Like you're always like looking to refine it and find something that sort of like works. And I say that like if you've got a script that even if it works well for sort of like a few months, then you'd want to be kind of looking at that again. Like I guess to give you the context of why we're updating the script is that like for us now at the moment we're updating it with a winter theme to make sure it speaks to our sort of like our winter appeal, and it's seasonal, so we're updating it. And of course there's been the Lebanon crisis, the Lebanon conflict, that we've been responding to, so at UNHCR, so we're making sure that like it speaks to that too. So I'd say, depending on your organization's work, you probably want to be looking at quite regularly for those purposes as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. That is all we have time for this morning. Thank you so much for sharing all of your insights and your experience, Richard. And also thank you everyone who shared in the chat, because it's been brilliant to have such active conversation and sharing across the sector. That's really what we want to hear at our webinars. So thank you for joining us. We will be sending around a recording of this, and we'll be sending a survey of what you would like to see in our webinars in 2025. So please make sure you get a chance to fill that in and share your thoughts with us. Seems like a few votes for WhatsApp, so that's really exciting. So that's something we're working on at the moment, but we'd love to hear more suggestions and thoughts. Thank you very much. Have a brilliant day. Hope you stay warm and toasty, and we will see you again soon. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Ron.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.